Welcome to Raptors today. Savanna Hamilton alongside Paul Jones and Sherman Hamilton. And of course, Amy Audibert will be joining us a little bit later. Guys, it is nearing, believe it or not, the end of 2021. I feel like this year has flown by. So we're going to take it back a little bit, do a bit of a year recap. I know that on my Spotify, I got like that Wrapped like song list thing that how many songs you listen to or whatever. We're going to do almost like a Raptors Wrapped starting from January. Remember when they were playing in Tampa Bay, Jonesy?
Yeah. There's part of me that says, do I have to remember that? It was kind of a difficult time for the world, the league, the team. The Raptors, the only team deposed from their home base and having to play somewhere else. So it was difficult. And you know, Savannah, as you talk about, remember, we're on more of a regular timetable now. Last year, there was big debates. Do we start in December? We're going to start in January. And all of a sudden, the money issue came into it, and they decided to start just before Christmas so they could have Christmas Day as, you know, the showcase that it normally is. And the Raptors got off to a really rocky start in January. They were 2-8, and you had the integration of so many things. People getting settled in Tampa for the first part. And then you had new players, a new location. I remember Nick Nurse saying that he'd go into Amalie Arena and he didn't know which way to go. Like he didn't know where his office was. Oh yeah, I turn here. And everything was so different. And then on the floor, Savannah, you know, when COVID hit, and Sherman and I can remember that last night in Utah, the Raptors were number one in the NBA in games that were one possession, 3 points plus or minus, ahead or behind, with a minute to go. The Raptors were 17-6 at that point when COVID hit, the best team in the NBA. In the month of January 2021 alone, they lost 4 games. They lost 4 of those games. We remember 2 in back-to-back nights with Golden State and Portland. So they were just kind of, there was so much tumult. They were learning how to, they were getting used to Tampa. They were learning to integrate new players. They were assimilating into a new arena. There was so much going on. I do remember a rocky start, but fortunately for them, they were able to kind of, not fall totally into the vortex and come out of it a bit in February.
Exactly. And on that note, let's talk about February, Sherman, because they went from 2-8 in January to 9-5 in February. They really turned it around. So, you know, what do you think was the turning point exactly? How did they do that in February?
Well, just based on some of the things that Jonesy talked about, particularly the housing situation, you know, you spend that first little while trying to figure out not only housing for you, but for your family, you know, schools for your kids, figuring out the area and how to actually navigate that. There's a lot going on off the court. And I think once you find somewhat of a routine or somewhat of a comfort level with that kind of stuff, you can continue to strike your focus on the court. And I think as those things settle down, the understanding of and getting familiar with the arena, getting familiar with the drive to practice, the drive home, and understanding that this is going to be different. And, you know, it takes a lot of time. As Jonesy said, they were extricated out of Toronto to go and work in Tampa. That's a whole different scenario for them. And so you've got to adjust to what that feels like, how you kind of manufacture it and navigate through that on a daily basis. And through that time in January, we saw the struggles and having the season had start mid-December. By the time you get to February, you have a bit more of your footing on your situation and everything that's happening. So the comfort level raises, the familiarity raises with the arena, with the staff, with everybody that's helping around and how different it is than what they're used to. So then you can play a bit more of the brand of basketball that you want to play. And I thought they got back to being the team that we have seen them be before that. The defense was there. Their offense was starting to come along. They started to be a team that started to understand the newer pieces on the roster. You know, Fred had an amazing game in that month, you know, a career game. So a lot of things started to fall into place, and then we know what happened after that. But obviously the comfort level, I think, was there, Savannah, and it was getting and moving in such a good direction for them in that month of February.
Yeah, I remember Norman Powell having a few good games in that month too. Yeah. You're so right. Like, people forget that these athletes are also humans. And could you imagine yourself having to pick up and move completely different and find your footing, but also be expected to perform at the highest level, and be dominant? Like, they were fourth in the East in February, just to keep that into context. But then, Jonesy, let's move on to a not so pleasant month. March 2021, the Raptors took a big hit. A lot of them had to follow COVID protocols. Fred VanVleet himself came out and said, hey, I was affected. And it has ramifications. And don't forget that at this point in the year in society, the vaccine wasn't as out there as it is now. So they had to overcome a lot of struggles. And, in this case, just talk about how much this was bigger than basketball in the month of March.
That's well put, Savannah. It was bigger than basketball. We were starting to all suffer from 1 year in, COVID fatigue. What's happening with the vaccine? Is it out? Who gets it? Who doesn't? The NBA, trying to be leaders and following the protocols, playing their games, yet keeping society safe. And it was interesting because there was one night when we happened to run into just after the All-Star, around the All-Star break. Because if you think about it, the All-Star break was pushed back. The Raptors were almost out the door for the All-Star break, and it hit them. And they lost players. Heck, they lost coaches. Remember that? Not just some of the players. There were coaches that weren't allowed to be on the bench. And Nick Nurse was working with a skeletal staff. And as you said, Savannah, it was bigger than basketball, and it hurt them. And you can see how it hurt, but you can understand too that basketball was really secondary. We're just trying to keep people healthy. We're just trying to get people, back on their feet, get them well, make sure their families are safe without, as you said, the vaccine being prevalent. So March was a tough month. In retrospect, I had a chance to speak with Masai Ujiri at the start of this season about last season. He said, we were almost out the door, as I just said, with the All-Star break and a chance to breathe, take some time off, and get things healthy. And COVID ravaged them just before they could get to that point. So March was a tough month, but it was more about survival and human survival than it was basketball in March of 2021.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of expectations were put on the Raptors without the understanding of health and safety first. It's like, I feel like a lot of fans were disappointed by the fact that they didn't make the playoffs. And this kind of leads us to April, where they missed it. But, it was bigger than that. I think the Raptors, because they had such a strong February, that was the team. That was the team that was looking great for the season. So if they didn't get sick in March, I would have expected a different outcome in terms of whether or not they missed the playoffs. But regardless, that's what they did. So Sherm, what was the goal of the organization for the remainder of the season, given the fact that you missed playoffs?
Well, I think throughout the whole season, the first and foremost goal of the Raptors were to stay healthy, to keep as many people healthy as they could. And we're talking beyond just COVID now. We're talking at the point of the season where they understand that the playoffs are not in the picture. Okay, well, Kyle Lowry's situation was up in the air with what was coming in the summer. He had a chance to go somewhere else. Were they going to keep him? That was a discussion. The idea of figuring out who these newer players are and seeing what they can do, giving them extended minutes on the floor, different scenarios, having them go through what we call real life practice situations in games. And that's huge. That you can't put a value on being able to find out what players are and what they may potentially be in game situations. Gary Trent Jr. comes over. You want to figure out who he is. What is his ceiling? What kind of things did you not know about his game when you saw him playing in Portland beside Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum? So there were a lot of moving pieces, but the most important thing was you understood that you didn't have to play your vets the way you would if you're pushing to win games. And the Raptors took that route. And part of that had to do with understanding what their future was going to look like. And I think when you get a chance to do that in a very unique situation like what the Raptors were in, you just talked about what happened in March to this team. It was unbelievable. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the first time that we saw in the NBA coaches be impacted by COVID We heard players getting impacted, but coaches, I don't think to that point we saw it on that mass scale how the Raptors bench was decimated. So there was a lot of moving parts, and health becomes the main focus, and looking forward towards the future and understanding that things are going to be very different when the start of 21-22 started coming around.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that spoke volumes to me was I love the fact that you pointed out that, you know, the younger players got an opportunity to play more. That's when we really saw Malachi Flynn shine. You know, he got April Rookie of the Month for the East. People forget that. He's a solid player, and he really showed out that month. And then Gary Trent Jr., I believe it was the end of March or beginning of April, but he dropped a 40-point game. We're like talking about what can this guy do? We saw his offense like immediately come to life like the moment he came to the Toronto Raptors. So there were definitely some highlights despite the fact that they missed the playoffs. But looking towards the offseason in 2021, well, it has come to a close. That era is gone. That chapter is done. Sherm, is there any parting words that you would like to say at Tampa?
Thank you. Thank you to Tampa. And I know throughout the course of the Raptors' time in Tampa, some Raptor fans here in Toronto and in Canada really felt that the Tampa fans could have been more supportive, but just understand the situation they're in. This is a town that didn't have an NBA. It's a town that really adopted a team, not because they asked for the team to come. It's because the team went there. And you think about the fact that they supported the way they understood what support meant during a very difficult time in COVID, and understanding that there's limited resources. If you're already supporting something else and here comes this lightning bolt of a team, how can you fit it into what you already have planned for your support in terms of your monetary value, your time, all the elements that go into trying to support a franchise? So I think Tampa did a very good job in terms of being accommodating, being very welcoming. And at the end of the day, you know, they did the best they could. And the Raptors tried to reciprocate by going into the community as much as they could with all the COVID restrictions and trying to be a part of them. And that's how you give back. And I thought Tampa, I can't understand anybody being upset with the fact that Tampa was able to support a team that wasn't theirs for the time that they did. Even though the team didn't do well, I thought they did a very good job at helping this team kind of acclimate to their situation.
It's no small task to host an NBA franchise, and they took it on. And, you know, so kudos to them. Shout out to them. You do got to give them their flowers where they deserve it. But Jonesy, let's fast forward now to draft night. The fourth pick, Scotty Barnes, you know, Masai and Bobby, they found a hidden gem.
Well, they did. And, you know, it's kind of funny. And we look back where we sit now as we're about to flip the calendar to 2022, where it just seemed like everybody knew what was right for the Raptors. You know, you had people, even in our field, that were considered, quote, experts, unquote, second guessing the pick. Everybody thought that Toronto should have picked somebody else. And, you know, it just goes to show, and I say this all the time to people, you really have to trust people that know how to do their jobs and whatever walk of life. I mean, you know, that dude comes to my house to fix the plumbing. I can stand over him all I want and ask the questions, but he knows what he's doing. So stand back and let him work. And I say the same thing about Masai, Bobby, Dan Tolzman, all of the people in the front office. Everybody thought it should have been something else. And we talked about it when he was drafted. There was an uproar, and it comes from a lot of people that, you know, watch the tournament, the NCAA tournament for 5 or 6 weeks, and all of a sudden get their GM credentials, and they know what every team needs, when in fact, these teams have been tracking these kids for years and years, and they're also looking at personalities and programs that they come from. And I look at Scotty Barnes as one of those guys. He will be better in the pros than he will be in college because of his freedom and where he goes and what he's allowed to do. And so look at Scotty. He's a culture guy coming from a Leonard Hamilton program at Florida State. He's proving to be very skilled. We're seeing him develop his three-point shot now. If he's not, you know, in a class by himself for Rookie of the Year, it doesn't take long to do attendance. Right now, it's him and Evan Mobley. So give the Raptors credit. Give Masai, Bobby, Dan Tolzman, give that team credit for their scouting and understanding what was best for the team in spite of the howls and cries from other people. So good for them. And it's proving to be, you know, it's proving to be a boon for them as Scotty Barnes plays well and continues to improve.
I don't know. I don't know why the fans would ever doubt Masai at this point. Hasn't he proven himself enough? Never, ever doubt what he picks. Like, you're right. I love your plumber analogy.
Savanna, it's round 2 for me because I was here in 95 when everybody wanted Ed O'Bannon after UCLA won the championship and they drafted Damon Stoudemire, and some people booed. And as we call him Biggie now, he turned out to be the rookie of the year. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Like I said, Scotty's in the discussion right now in a very, very high spot.
You know, I was watching back on a few of our Raptors Today episodes, and you and I did a draft episode, and we talked about the second round in particular. We're like, yeah, you know, it's exciting. This is before we drafted who we did. And we talked about the hidden gems that are also in the second round that may not have gotten the looks or have been overlooked in the past. So, you know, we did draft David Johnson and Delano Banton. I'd say those are pretty two solid picks as well, Sherman.
No question about it, Sav. Those 2 picks, as Jonesy talked about, Masai, Dan, Bobby, the whole management team, their scouting staff, they do a very thorough job in terms of understanding that there are some real important picks, late first round, second round picks that can really help your franchise. And even if it's not today, it can help down the road. And I think that the Raptors have taken over the mantle as that team that understands and figures out where to find these pieces later in the first round or in the second round. And I think they've taken it from the San Antonio Spurs, who did a great job with some of their second round and their late first round picks that led to championship players and future Hall of Famers as well. So I think the staff for the Toronto Raptors have done a great job. And as you said, Sav, David Johnson, he's more of a longer-term project right now with the way that they're handling him, but there's potential there, no doubt. And Delano Banton, they just dropped him in the fire and said, hey, young fella, you got to play. You got to play right now. And he's responded, I think, in a very, very impressive way. And you can see, if you didn't know who Delano Banton was before, having seen him play, you could see why he looks like a complete steal where he was drafted in the second round based on what he's going to be able to do moving forward. So those 2 guys, I think, have a chance to have bright futures. I'm not going to say superstars or stars, but they're going to be important parts of a team moving forward. And the Raptors hope it's with them if they can continue to develop them. But those 2 guys were worthy second-round picks. And the way they play, they could really, when we look back at that draft, especially with Delano, you think that we could look back and say, maybe Delano should have been drafted higher than where he was drafted based on his production moving forward.
Absolutely. I think you just nailed it right there. The impact that Delano immediately had on this Raptors team was, I don't think anybody saw that coming, you know, and it's great. It's just bonus points that he happens to be from the community, Rexdale. He's already giving back. And in terms of David Johnson, I had a pleasure of actually watching him perform with the Raptors on 05, and he's great. Like, he is a solid wing player. So I feel like, to the Raptors fans, don't sleep on him. Don't worry. He's still developing. He's still emerging, but he could be quite the talent in the future. We do got to touch on Kyle Lowry's trade. Wah, wah, wah. I feel like we need music there, right there. Obviously, you got traded for Goran Dragic and Precious Achiuwa. But, you know, now that we can all see that era come to a close, it's still kind of bittersweet. I think we're past it, but it's still a little bittersweet to see the Groat leave. Isn't that right, Jonesy?
Yeah, it is. You know, the guy came to Toronto and 10 toes on the ground, man. Both feet in, jumped right in, not only on the court, evolved into a terrific leader, and then took it off the court as well. All the things that he did in the community, you know, the way he performed on and off the court. There's just, I mean, where do you start as to what he has accomplished and how he endeared himself to not only the city, but the country. And I think it all comes down to Kyle's personality. He's an all-in type of guy. When he decided that, you know, he wanted the championship or he was going to, you know, play for the championship in Toronto, he dragged everybody along with him. You know, he did things that you do to win. He made winning plays. And if it meant sacrificing himself or his body or sacrificing for the team, well, if that's what it takes to win, I'm going to do that. You know, it is melancholy, Sav. It is tough to see that come to an end. And I always, you know, I'm not a big drinker, but people that I know that have expensive bottles of wine say you look at the wine, you imagine what it would be like to drink it. You crack it open, you start drinking, you're with friends, you're having a great time. And then you realize, wow, my glass is almost empty. And let me fill, oh man, I'm looking at the bottle. I can't fill it up. There's only a little bit left in the bottle. So whether you like it or not, we're at the end, and it's going to end. And I think the Raptor fans got everything they could out of the bottle that had Kyle Lowry's name on it. And they saved a little bit in the bottom, and they gave it to Miami and said, okay, you guys can finish it off. But he leaves here with great memories and really endearing himself to the Raptor fan base.
We're now going to throw over to Amy Audibert to talk a little Raptors Summer League.
Thanks, Sav. Now let's pack our bags and head out west to the NBA Summer League. This is one of the most exciting events of the year. And for the Toronto Raptors and their fan base, this was the renewed hope, right? There was good news. The team should be coming back home. And there were still some doubters about the number 4 overall draft pick. Scotty Barnes is very icky to say that, isn't it? But this was our first look at our new Toronto Raptor, and he came to impress. Listed right around 6'7". So when he walked in the gym, I was in Vegas. I think everyone just automatically passes the eye test. But then when he gets out on the court and he plays with this energy that is often consistently unmatched, and he brought that. Every time he had a microphone in front of his face, he talked about the will to win, the wanting to defend, and he backed it out every single time he was on the court. He averaged right around 16-7. But the big thing was over 3 assists per game and 2 blocks. So a great IQ and a great vision for the game. For the Toronto Raptors, obviously the huge offseason deal, the sign and trade for Kyle Lowry to the Miami Heat. And part of that package included the acquisition of Precious Achiuwa, who did spend his rookie year playing behind Bam Adebayo. So the NBA community didn't necessarily get to see a lot of Bam play. So when he averaged over 26 minutes per game in the Summer League, it was a consistent look for everybody. And I think you saw why the Raptors were excited to get this young man, because what he brings, elite energy, but also the ability to rip a defensive rebound off the rim and bust out dribble the other way, allowing shooters to run in transition. He plays with a whole lot of energy, and he's still a very raw talent. So this is a great fit for Precious Achiuwa.
Thanks, Amy. And that wraps up part 1 of our Raptors Day recap from the previous season. In part 2, we'll be talking about this current season. So stay tuned for that. I'm Savanna Hamilton with Paul Jones, Sherman Hamilton, Amy Audibert, Jake behind the scenes, and Luke, our editor. Thank you for watching Raptors Today, and have a happy holidays.